So this is the second half of my reaction to a video done by a YouTuber by the name of Ryan Macbeth. He claims that he's somebody famous. He was in Australia for 6 days and he was in Sydney and the Gold Coast. And he is perfectly honest at the start of his video and says, I'm only basing this on what I know from being in Sydney and the Gold Coast. And looking at the first half of his video, I found some of the things he was saying to be quite insightful. But at the same time, I realised after going through it that in some ways he comes across as being a bit of a blowhard. So I'm undecided on this guy, but I'm going to push on and listen to what else he has to say in his video and share my thoughts.
I want to talk about whiskey for a second here. I think that there are some things that different countries do well. It certainly seems like Australia does public transportation well. Australia does not do whiskey well. This is not a whiskey country. I think Kentucky still has a leg up on the rest of the world because I asked for whiskey here and they're like, oh sure, we have Jim Beam, we have Jack Daniels, and I'm like, oh my god. So once in a while I haven't found any. I think one place had Eagle Rare, one place had Angel's Envy, but for the most part it's just the crummy wild turkey stuff that comes out of the U.S. And I tried an Australian whiskey and wasn't too impressed.
I don't think he even realised what it was that he just said there. He's there criticising Australian whiskey and say Australians don't do whiskey any good. It's not like good old Kentucky whiskey from back home. It's just this crappy wild turkey stuff and Jack Daniels that comes out of the United States. So he's basically saying that the crappier whiskey that they make in the United States, which is imported to Australia, is the reason that Australians can't do good whiskey. He's basically saying that crappy American whiskey is actually crappy Australian whiskey, totally ignoring the fact that it is American whiskey. Now, had this guy actually spent a decent amount of time in Australia, he could have discovered that there are a lot of really top quality boutique distilleries in Australia that make some pretty damn good whiskies. One that comes to mind, I believe the Lark Distillery down in Tasmania makes a pretty mean whiskey. And not only that, he's talking about his experience at the pub. So pubs, they're only going to stock so many products of each range. Because you can imagine otherwise they're going to have so much stock on hand that doesn't get finished. So of course they are going to have the most well-known brands on hand because they're what people are going to ask for. But I'm pretty certain that if this guy went to a bottle shop and had a look in the whiskey section, he would see some pretty top quality whiskies at the bottle shop. So he's making an assumption based on going into an Australian pub and seeing what is the most popular, as in the most widely publicised whiskey, and then turning around and saying that this crap American whiskey is crap Australian whiskey and that we therefore don't know how to make whiskey. It's just a little bit arrogant.
So I think Australia is maybe more into wine and maybe gin, like other kind of spirits, but Australian whiskey, not where it's at.
As someone who doesn't drink gin, I can't comment on the quality of the gin that is produced in Australia But I know there are some pretty good distilleries, like boutique distilleries in Australia that produce gin. As for wine, well, we know that we make a pretty damn good wine here in Australia. But yeah, I found it a little bit rude, and I think that had he actually done his research and had not had his mind set on, well, Kentucky, that's where whiskey comes from, so that must be where the best whiskey is, and being more interested in actually trying some boutique whiskies, he may have been pleasantly surprised.
That being said, smoking laws. So, in the U.S., we have, or at least in some states, you have cigar clubs or cigar bars where you go in there and there's leather chairs and you sit and you have a drink and you smoke a cigar. There is no indoor smoking in Australia at all. Zero. So to smoke here, you need to be outside, and I found one like outside rooftop bar. It's kind of interesting. And
well, I for one have to say that I appreciate being able to go into a bar or a restaurant and not finding myself choking on cigarette smoke. Probably wouldn't choke on smoke from a cigar, because almost nobody in Australia smokes them because they are so foul.
in Sydney, it is like the town of speakeasies. There's speakeasies freaking everywhere.
Okay, I had to look that one up to figure out what the heck he was talking about, because my understanding of a speakeasy is that they were the illegal bars that they had in America during Prohibition. And we don't have any illegal bars in Australia. But what he's referring to is just your everyday bar. If it's just got that vibe that we would normally see in a bar in Australia, he considers that to be a speakeasy. So he's basically saying there are bars everywhere in Sydney. And yeah, there are plenty of bars around the place in Australia, because we do appreciate a chance to sit down and unwind with a drink or two.
In Australia. And I found this one where you can go up to the top and they have like 3 tables that they kind of consider the smoking section. What's interesting is that some people, it's almost like they've never seen a cigar before. I just don't think cigars are a thing here in Australia, so that might be it. There's people who smoke cigarettes, but nobody smokes cigars here.
True, you don't see people smoking cigars here in Australia, but it's more than that. I'm gathering that he has been getting filthy looks from people for wandering down a public street smoking a cigar and blowing cigar smoke everywhere, because we've become accustomed to not having people being in our face with their tobacco. You know, there are now designated smoking areas everywhere, and generally walking down the street smoking a cigarette is one thing. It's still not pleasant when someone walks past you and blows cigarette smoke in your face. But to be walking down the street with a big stinky cigar, blowing cigar smoke everywhere, I'm pretty certain that he got a lot of filthy looks from people. And I also think that he's possibly, by turning around and saying, well, you know, you're only allowed to smoke outside, I suspect that he doesn't realise a lot of the regulations when it comes to smoking outside, in terms of not being able to smoke so far from an entranceway and stuff like that. So I think he's possibly just not understood the smoking culture in Australia and been a little bit too, well, inadvertently selfish in terms of making other people choke down his cigar smoke, and they've not been happy about it.
Yeah, the tobacco tax is pretty high. I think I bought a Dunhoff cigar here, and I think it cost about $30, roughly $40 Australian, about $30 American. And that's just their rules. I guess if you're going to have universal health care, you want to make money somehow and discourage people from smoking. Which actually kind of reminds me, you discourage people from smoking, but there are American snacks everywhere here.
So he's inferring here that smoking is on par with consuming crappy, unhealthy American snacks. That's just insane. And let's be real, where are the snacks from? America. What is the most consumeristic country in the world? America. What country eats the most crap? America. And let's just establish one thing in terms of these American snacks that are imported. There are additives in American foods that are banned in Australia. So while there are American snacks here in Australia that are available, there's a lot that will never be brought to Australia because of the health risks that come from certain additives that are readily available in American snacks. But honestly, turning around and trying to say, well, you guys put a tax on smoking, but hey, you've got all these American snacks. It's a really, really lame argument.
I traveled in the military 20, 30 years ago, and I was in Europe, and there was some American sodas and some American candy, but I think over the past 20, 30 years, America has just infiltrated the rest of the world. At least they infiltrated Australia, because like everywhere you go here, you have Western fast food outlets, although Burger King is called like Hungry Jack's here. You have Western chips, Western soda, or I shouldn't say Western, American chips, American fast food, American soda, everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. And I guess I never really realized the cultural cachet American has. Even the bliss sticks. While I was here, I needed some chapstick because it got a little cold and I didn't have any chapstick with me. So I went to one of these bodegas. I don't think they call it a bodega here, but I went to this bodega and I bought some chapstick or bliss sticks. And it was made in America. I thought, wow, what? America has just infiltrated everything from snacks to the stuff you put on your chapped lips.
I'm trying to figure out what his actual point is there. So you have things here that come from America. And so, yeah, there are American products worldwide. I don't know if he's trying to say, look at us, we make really good shit that goes everywhere in the world and they like our food. Because to be quite honest, people look at a lot of American takeaway stuff as being somewhat crappy stuff. A lot of people won't eat American takeaways. Some people, yeah. And same with American snacks and stuff. There's options now in Australia. You can go to Aldi and you can buy snacks that don't have added preservatives and don't have added colours. And a lot of Australians prefer that over the crap that gets sent here from America.
High tea. That's kind of a neat thing. I've been to England before, but I think that was just a layover. So I can say I've been to the airport, right, in England and to Ireland. Now that I think of it, I think that was on the way back. Might have been on the way back from Iraq. We stopped in Ireland. And that's not really stopping in Ireland, right? If you stop at the airport. But so I experienced tea here in Australia. Like tea is a thing. Like around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. You sit down, you have tea. Although it seems like most Australians drink coffee. But it's I sat down for tea, and I have no idea how to actually do tea, and it was high tea. Apparently, there's a difference between tea and high tea. And high tea, they have little cakes and stuff. And I was at this hotel. I was invited to high tea, and this nice Indian woman like explained to me how to make the tea, and how to like eat the cakes, because there's a certain way to do it. You don't eat the cakes with your fingers; you eat them with a spoon. I'm like, all right. And you know, my family is from Northern Ireland. You'd think we'd know how to do tea, but you know, after many years in America, you don't really do tea anymore, right? You're pretty much Americanized. So to me, tea is like Lipton. Although I did have some fans in Ireland actually send me proper tea, which I've made before. I just didn't know the whole rituals that you go through making this tea.
Okay, let's get real. High tea is hardly part of Australian culture. It is a marketing thing that a lot of the high-end hotels and restaurants like to do to bring in money, and people do enjoy going there as a one-off experience. It's a social experience. People don't go and have high tea every day in Australia. We don't all stop at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and go, oh, well, let's have our high tea now, and then we'll get back to work. That's just not it. High tea is very much an upper class English thing. It is not an Australian thing. I don't even know what he was talking about terms of rituals for making the tea. Because for me, when I make a cup of tea, I get out a tea bag, I stick it in the mug and pour the hot water on. I do love tea out of a nice teapot, done properly, or done with tea leaves, but I don't own a teapot, and I lost my tea strainer, so for me it's tea out of a tea bag. And as for high tea, I don't think I've even ever had high tea.
Another thing about Australia, at least Sydney, is that probably about a quarter of the people here that I've seen it seems like they're from Hong Kong. And I guess when Hong Kong was handed over to the Chinese, a heck of a lot of people left, and they came to Australia. You know, they just wanted that freedom more than they wanted to stay in Hong Kong. So in Sydney, it's an international city. You see people from all walks of life here. But there's a lot of people, maybe about a quarter, maybe 20% of the people here are from Hong Kong. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Now that is a massive presumption. So I'm curious that while he was here in Australia for that 6 days, of these 25% of people that he believes were all from Hong Kong, did he go and ask every single person, oh hello, are you from Hong Kong? Because we have so many people in Australia who are of Asian descent. That doesn't mean they're all from Hong Kong. It's just insane. He's making a presumption based on his knowledge of one single worldwide event and thinking, well, people left Hong Kong, so they must have all come here to Sydney. Obviously, you're going to get different areas of Sydney, just like you do in Melbourne, where you have larger populations of people from certain areas. So I don't know which part of Sydney he was in, and maybe he saw all these people of Asian descent in wherever it was he was staying, and now he's made that as a global presumption that 25% of everyone in Sydney is of Asian descent. Now, obviously, I don't live in New South Wales, so I don't walk down the streets in Sydney every day and see the disbursement of population and see how many people are Asian descent and how many of Western descent or anything like that. So I can't be super qualified here in what I'm saying, but it does seem like a gross assumption that he's making here.
I also noticed in the Gold Coast, there are a lot of Chinese tourists, and I guess it's like new money. And I know that like for years, like in the 1960s, 1970s, there was this trope of the ugly American, you know, the guy with a credit card who's dressed, you know, very casually, who's traveling all over Europe and making a scene and demanding things. And he doesn't understand that he's in a different country and people don't do things like that, or he's going into a French bakery and asking for a hamburger, you know. I think the ugly American might have been replaced by Chinese tourists with money.
Please do leave your own comments on that statement below, because honestly, I could rant all day about that. Yes, there are some quite loud Asian tourists, not necessarily all Chinese tourists, and it seems to be that he is not overly familiar with people of Asian descent and has lumped them all into one category. Because I think, like I said with Sydney, I haven't been to the Gold Coast in a long, long time, so I couldn't tell you what the tourist population is like there, but I think it'd be more than just Chinese tourists. I think you would have Asian tourists from various countries, and yeah, they can be a bit in your face sometimes, and they can be a little bit loud sometimes, but let's get real. Those American tourists that he's talking about still exist, and he's borderline one of them. And if you have followed my channel for a little while now, you've seen videos that I've done about American tourists who are precisely the kind of people he is talking about. So to me it seems like a little bit of gaslighting. I'm starting to feel that this guy does have a bit of a sense of a superiority of American culture. If we're American, we are superior to the rest of the world. At first, when I started listening to this video, I thought he was kind of being quite nice about Australia. That the more I listen, the more I realise that he really is gaslighting, not just Australia, but every other country that's not America.
Because I went to I went to this one wildlife sanctuary where I saw like koalas and kangaroos and stuff. Saw a massive crocodile. I think it must have been the size of like a minibus or something, right?
And here is the origin of all these crazy notions that Americans have about Australia. When you get some American talking about crocodiles being the size of a minibus. And that just adds to this whole notion of everything in Australia is going to kill you. So now he's got several 100,000 fans who watch his videos apparently, who are now going to believe that in Australia we have crocodiles that are the size of a minibus.
And I wanted to like see it do something, but apparently they can hold their breath for like 7 hours. And all right, well, guess I'm not doing anything with this crocodile, all right? I'm not gonna watch anything happen with this crocodile. I was just chilling out underwater. So I was at this sanctuary, and there was like a rope line where you could see the kangaroos, and the kangaroos could come out of their enclosure, which was really only protected by a rope. And I guess the kangaroos could come out there if they wanted kangaroo food, but none of them did, you know. So this one, beyond this rope line, there were signs saying like, "This is a kangaroo rest area. Don't go beyond this rope." And there was a picture of a guy with a slash through it. Well, even if you don't speak English, you probably know what a guy with a slash through it means, right? Like, don't go here. That's pretty universal, right? So these Chinese tourists, I guess they wanted to get a picture next to a kangaroo, so they just walked over the rope line. And then another thing, when I went to high tea, this Chinese woman came in, and she took a cup, like a paper cup, and just filled the cup up with snacks. You know, I was like, wow, you like I know not to do that, right? So I don't know why. I don't know if a lot of Chinese tourists are like that, or whether it's just like new money, or whether I just found two like rude Chinese tourists, you know. But I was kind of like, wow, that's pretty interesting.
There's some serious deflection going on here. So he's heard people talk about the impact that Americans have in places that they go to. And yeah, there are some Americans who travel and are a bit arrogant and do have a negative impact on the area where they're in. They do things that are rude and are socially unacceptable. So, how is this guy deflecting from that? He's now talking about two experiences he had with Asian people while he was here for a whole 6 days, and is basically trying to say, well, don't look at America because look at these guys. They're way worse than America. Let's talk about the video I did the other week where these people from America were in Australia for, I think they said 3 months. And the whole time they were there, they kept turning left on a red light and wondered why nobody else in Australia was doing that. So apparently, having gotten warmed up in his original video, where he was trying to sound quite positive about Australia, he is now coming across as being, yeah, a bit of a blowhard, basically, and a little bit narcissistic, maybe, I'm not sure, but starting to show his true colours, perhaps, a little bit critical. There is more of this video, and I am actually going to tackle the rest of it, but I'm going to tackle it in another video because I've said way too much in this video, so it's actually ended up quite long. So thanks for listening. Thanks for bearing with me if you are still listening. Please leave your comments below. What are your thoughts on this guy? Also, please hit the like button and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so.